Hi, thanks for joining me on this platform. My name is Mark Deuze. I'm a professor of media studies at the University of Amsterdam. And I would like to talk today briefly about the role that media studies as a discipline, as a field of study, plays or can play in the global coronavirus pandemic. Of course, the pandemic is about a virus that infects people, that has a high mortality rate, that causes the entire society to slow down, to stop, and to try to deal with this horrible disease. At the same time, it is also very much a media phenomenon in all kinds of different ways. And especially that relationship between the pandemic on the one hand and its media or mediatized elements on the other hand, I think is interesting and fertile ground for teaching, for research, and for our discipline to become relevant in our discussions and how we make sense of all of this. Now, traditionally, media studies, as it emerged in the 60s and 70s and 80s over a long period of time, would look at the role of media in society from one of three perspectives. We would look either at the content of the media, and in media studies we were particularly interested in issues of representation and genre, for example. We would look at reception of media. How do people use media? How do people make sense of media? How do people decode, if you will, media and make media relevant to themselves and to their everyday lives? And a bit later on, in the 80s and 90s, we started also to include studies of how media were made, the production side, if you will, of media. And from the assumption that who media makers are and how the media industry works actually shapes and to a large extent explains the kind of media we all use on a day-to-day basis. Now, in the last decade or so, this focus, this traditional organization between production, content, and reception has changed quite substantially. And the reason is quite straightforward. How can we still keep these areas meaningfully apart? And we know both theoretically as well as practically that making media and using media happen simultaneously. Think about your use of something as basic as a smartphone, right? If you send a WhatsApp message on your smartphone, are you using media? Your phone, the specific interface of WhatsApp. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, so you're using Facebook at that moment, and so on and so forth. Or are you making media, composing a message, adding a funny smile or emoji, or you add a picture or a video, and so on and so forth. So making and using media have become synonymous almost, if you will, in our modern digital media use. So we started to focus on issues that cut across this taxonomy. And the two key issues that media studies looks at today from a variety of perspectives, on the one hand, is the role of affect in media. In other words, how we feel about media, how media make us feel, the role that media play in the whole effective organization of our lives, what we care about, what we feel is worthy of our attention, what we think is valuable or true. And we look at, next to affect, to the role of materiality. In other words, the actual stuff that we use, the technologies, the devices, the platforms, the interfaces, the software, the hardware, the code, the data, those kind of robust material elements that make up all our media, whether it's television sets or smartphones or computers, are incredibly powerful in helping us understand how we make sense of things, how we navigate in the world, whether we are media makers trying to tell a convincing or compelling story, whether we are media users trying to sort of put together a fun or meaningful media diet from the millions of sources and options at our disposal, or when we want to make sense of content of media that flows across all these platforms and devices. Content that maybe starts its life as a film on a big screen, migrates to clips that we see on a smartphone, and then ends up on our smart television set through a streaming service like Netflix, for example. So affect and materiality as sort of the overall themes through which we look at all the different aspects of the media, if you will. Now, so how does this relate to the global pandemic? Well, first and foremost, and this I think is the most important sort of aha moment that I had in all of this, was the fact that when the WHO, the World Health Organization, came out with its original communiques about what was going on in the world regarding the coronavirus, it labeled the coronavirus a pandemic as well as an infodemic. And this term, infodemic, was new, and it immediately got picked up, as you can see, by news organizations around the world, by the Washington Post, the Guardian, and any other news organizations. It became a subject of much of research in the Lancet, an important piece on how to fight an infodemic. The World Health Organization, again, attributing the infodemic as much danger and weight as the pandemic. In other words, how we use media and how media are used in the distribution of information and in the production of media is just as consequential as the actual virus itself. And this is not by some media professor, but by the World Health Organization making this claim. Now, soon thereafter, UNESCO released a report saying, well, we shouldn't talk about an infodemic, but a disinfodemic, sounding even more ominous, if you will. And again, emphasizing that infodemic, that the role that media play in the pandemic is an incredibly important, but also problematic one. Again, the word danger being used here. So let's look at this conjunction, if you will, of a pandemic and an infodemic, or perhaps even disinfodemic, from the perspectives of media studies as we've come to know them in the recent decades. So an effective reading of the pandemic-infodemic relationships would look at how we use and make media and how that makes us feel, and to what extent these feelings contribute to a specific experience, a particular way of experiencing the coronavirus and the coronavirus pandemic. So on the one hand, you would say, well, you know, for example, the information we get online or from news media or from any kind of media, and especially the information we then share and talk about in social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on WhatsApp, on TikTok, and so on and so forth, really contributes to us feeling, well, let's just say not alone. And social support, strengthening social ties, offering ways of bonding in times of social distancing and lockdowns, and flattening the curve and being alone at home. So a powerful role that media play here in keeping people still feeling that they belong somewhere or to someone else. We see how important media are in effective crisis communications. We see some governments and some people in government doing this better than others, and talking to us with information that we need, that we can understand and that we can use, or saying things that make us feel anxious and afraid. And so on and so forth. So crisis communication as a key element in how we deal with this. Look at how journalism is doing. Incredible opportunities now worldwide for global collaborative journalism, for journalists working together in uncovering how the virus works, what is happening with vaccines, how are we to make sense of people getting infected and the numbers of people that are dying and on intensive cares, and that kind of horrible but incredibly important information. And finally, the role of media in stimulating and enabling expert networks for people working together in real time, doing research, both on a medical side, developing, for example, a vaccine, but also very much in media studies. People working together on books and journal articles and research, documenting how people use media, what we experience in the media right now, archiving all the different media utterances that we can find, really contributing to our understanding and how and our experience of all of this. So that's one side of the effective relationship between the pandemic and the infodemic. But that side is hardly mentioned or emphasized, because what we hear mostly about the role of media in all of this is its scary, dark, and dangerous side. And the emphasis there is on, oh boy, what about the role of media in promoting or distributing false cures? Letting people believe that what they see and what they hear in media might be real, and then they would, drink disinfectants, then they would find malaria medication and use that, and media play a dangerous role in distributing this kind of news. For fake news and misinformation in general, of course, incredibly problematic and highly dangerous. The UNESCO, again, mentioning that this has fatal consequences. The role of social media, again, in distributing hate, racism, xenophobia, fear, rumors, lies, all the horrible things that people do to themselves and each other in day-to-day life, now amplified on social media, and having horrible consequences for people in the real world. Another problematic element is the targeting, deliberate targeting of both journalists and experts, especially medical experts, when they speak out, when these people in positions of authority and trust stand up or have a presence on television or in social media or anywhere else. They're being targeted and attacked by people online for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons is a problematic, affective issue in its own right, the politicization of the pandemic through the media, with certain political leaders on all elements of the political spectrum using the pandemic for their own political purposes and distributing their information and messages through media. So here we see the effective relationship, the effective component of media at work, both from a, if you will, optimistic and pessimistic side, with the pessimistic side, for understandable reasons, getting much more attention, much more screen time, if you will. From a materiality perspective, when we look at the hardware, the software, the actual technological components of the media, we see media play, and again, an incredibly prominent role in all of this. We see a lot of debates and discussions and initiatives with millions of dollars being attributed to this in the fields of telemedicine, of digital health, of the rapid development of apps on your smartphone to track and trace the coronavirus infections, to software that automates the monitoring of ICUs across intensive care units, across multiple hospitals, of doctors seeing their patients online, so that people don't have to come into the office, especially if they feel unsafe and are scared of being infected. All of that up to something as simple as exercising in the morning with a personal trainer through YouTube, yoga on YouTube, all of us stretching our limbs in our home, in our bedrooms, in our living rooms, trying to maintain some kind of physical exercise in this stay-at-home time. So from this admittedly very brief reading of the role media plays in the pandemic and the role media studies play, it helps us focus and zoom in, pardon the pun, on how seminal media have become in something as incredibly real world and physical as a global pandemic, as a virus that infects and kills. So studying media studies is not just a study of the things that we love about our media, about our favorite film or game, or about maybe one day becoming a journalist or a marketer or somebody who works in advertising. It is also very much a study of the real world, of everyday life, and of people trying to make it work through everything they do and everything that they engage in the world. And media studies, in a way, has become an incredibly powerful tool to access people's lived experience of that what happens in the world, and how we make sense of what happens in the world in turn makes things happen in the world. And that's where the media come in. That's where the media cannot be divorced of anything that happens in the world, not even a pandemic that we're now all experiencing. I hope this has contributed somewhat to your understanding and appreciation of media studies as a discipline tackling the challenges of our time. And I look forward seeing you in a classroom, whether it's online or offline. Thank you.